I'm very happy to say, one day after Earth Day, I'm joined by the Chief Treadright and Sustainability Officer for the Travel Corporation, Shannon Guihan. Shannon, thank you so much for talking to us. I mean, it's become almost a cliche to say that the pandemic has forced us to, slow down, take a look at travel and consider what it actually means to travel responsibly.
Mhm.
And while it's a conversation that's been had for many years now, you're working at the proverbial coalface of this. So to what degree do you think that this conversation has been amplified over the last 12 months or so?
It's a really good question because it's not a new conversation, as you said, and it was happening in earnest before COVID. However, I do think that we had a collective shock to the system, a collective go to your room, you're not behaving, if you can call it that. And I think that it allowed a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily consider the way in which we behave or the way in which we use resources or the things that we take for granted, which is your holiday in Spain. I think people were given the opportunity forcibly to think about that. And, so what I think that's done is it's taken a very necessary and eager conversation and brought it to many more households, many more businesses. So I think that's been the case.
And the word sustainability is such a huge term. And
Mhm.
we may just assume that we know what it means or fear that we know what it means. So can you just give us a quick usable definition?
Sure. And I think it makes people's eyes glaze over, hands
Yes,
down.
it does. It can do.
My mom watched an interview I did last week and she's like, I got it. So, sustainable, regenerative, responsible, I hazard to say eco, transformative, all of these things, at the end of the day, it's, are you being respectful of the place that you are in and the resources that you are using? Do you understand this is somebody else's home?
That's a really easy working definition that, of course, should you want to, you can dig right into.
And as an organization, you are obliged to dig into it. You are obliged to understand through measurement and goal setting your carbon footprint and how to mitigate it. You are obliged to take a look at issues such as the use of single-use plastics and other unnecessary convenience items. You have to consider whether or not your food is being sourced locally and organically, and the fact that food waste is a massive contributor to climate change. What energy are you employing at your offices? Are you asking your team to take train travel when it's a short trip and the train is available? It's tactics that you need to employ to simply just be responsible.
And I imagine that it's a campaign or a series of campaigns that are extra challenging when applied to a company like the Travel Corporation. The Travel Corporation, because it's not just one company. You're talking about lots of different companies that have lots of different activities in the travel market.
Yes, it's a bit of a head spinner sometimes. 40 brands operating globally, sales offices in California, Toronto, Australia, UK. The list goes, and I'm summarizing briefly, and I'm cutting off, half of the elephant. So yeah, it's very complex, and that is often why I think people look at us and ask, well, can you achieve it? And it's a simple answer. We've built a structure of support at the Travel Corporation, and that is why we can achieve it. So the Treadright team, we oversee our strategic approach to sustainability in addition to our philanthropic approach through our Treadright Foundation. From there, and we are three based in Toronto. From there, we work hand in hand with all of our products and operations teams and travel designers at every single brand. And they are critical because they measure our carbon footprint. They source local and sustainable. They find our Make Travel Matter experiences. They work with us on animal welfare and do our audits of all of our products. So it's the structure that we have in place that's quite massive. It's the fact that our chief executive, Brett Tolman, is committed to this, and that's who I report to. It's the fact that we sit on the executive committee and all the brand heads are committed. So it's a full systems approach and a business function approach that's allows us to get it done.
And you've designed an 11 goal strategy. And just to look at the top line, number one, carbon neutrality by 2030, which is a hugely ambitious ambition, if you can say that. 50% renewable energy sources, 50% reduction in food waste, even what seems like a small thing, but 50% fewer printed brochures by 2025. So, and all of this on the screen, because that's where I saw it, looks like a huge challenge, but I imagine all of this is achievable.
Well, it must be, or we wouldn't put our name to it. And so, behind that, I'm a former consultant. So I think in, from a strategic approach, and behind that, we have an action plan in place. And what it does is it takes every goal and it associates it with a series of tactics that need to be employed on a per brand, per function level between now and 2025. In addition to a rigorous reporting program. So do we track this via our environmental reporting system, Irish-based, called Acuvio? Do we track it through biannual surveys? Is there another way that we need to track this? So everything ladders up to our team so that we can stay on top of implementation. And that's very important. You don't just throw it on a page. And the percentage reductions that we have put in place are doable, they're achievable. When it comes to carbon neutrality, that's why yesterday we launched a new separate plan that is in support of our How We Tread Right plan, and it's our climate action plan. And, carbon neutrality by 2030 is not that difficult. And sadly, one could buy their way out of it by relying solely on offsets. We simply don't wish to do that. Our focus, and that is why, the second point in our plan, our 5-point plan, is to reduce, and reductions are difficult. And our targets won't be in place until the middle of next year, because we need to get back to, an operating normality post-COVID, so that we can identify where those reductions can sit. And I think it's just important for people to know that, we are employing carbon offsets on our trips, and that's simply because we don't own that supply chain. But we do have a considerable number of assets. We have 20 offices. We've got our Red Carnation hotels, our Uniworld ships, and we're working diligently to shift energy sources, fuel sources. And, that's where the real work happens on how you can reduce rather than avoid carbon emissions.
It also seems it's challenging, but also potentially very costly.
Yeah, it will cost money. And that's why we have to, consider your financial outlay over a period of time. And that's why it's 2030, because, shifting whole ships to a different fuel source takes even just the amount of research that goes in from the Uniworld team to identify the appropriate fuel sources that would work. That's a whole separate team. We couldn't do that on our own. So yeah, it's going to take some investment that we need to be mindful of, and that we need to be responsible when employing.
And travel, of course, is caught in that conundrum, because the whole aim of travel is to get people dispersed around the world on flights, on boats, on ships, on trains, whatever way you can. And particularly now looking forward after a year where so many in the travel industry have been decimated, where the desire now is to get business up and running quickly so that they can start earning that much needed income that they've lost over the last year. So when confronted with a challenge over greater sustainability, and as a writer for Lonely Planet, I know it was always stay longer, travel slower, stay longer. That was always a mantra that we as writers were encouraged to promote. How do you square that circle?
I mean, there's a lot of things at play there. I encourage stay longer. I also have two small kids, so it's a lot easier for me to do that. And I don't want to travel too often with them on the planes, but so that's how we travel as a family. And each market is different. I'm in Canada, so I'm not just jumping on a plane to go to Spain for the weekend, so things are planned a little bit more differently. We have fewer availability of vacation days, but there's a lot of, I square it because I'm very motivated by technology and encouraged with the technological solutions. So carbon removal, for instance. I look at travel and the travel industry, and we have become remarkably successful. I'm from Newfoundland, East Coast Canada, and tourism blew up when our cod fisheries collapsed. That's not a story unlike a lot of places that shifted from heavy to quote unquote soft industries. And so we've made destinations worldwide remarkably reliant on travel and tourism and the movement of people. And that cessation was devastating, as we saw. So we don't want a further cessation, but we do need to adjust the way in which we operate through the use of renewables, through new fuels types. The carbon removal projects that we've invested in, Project Vesta and Greenwave, two US-based organizations, they take carbon out of the atmosphere and store them permanently. And I'm very motivated by those sorts of projects that are out there. And I think that as a travel and tourism industry, we need to see some responsibility in helping that technology scale, because by employing it, it will keep us a resilient industry. We can't just stop again. Airlines are the spanner in the works, if you will. It's not the planes, it's not the movement of people, it's 100% the fuel. And we need them to support us by encouraging those technological shifts that are not impossible, nor are they cheap.
How important is it, though, to have allies at a governmental level? Because without naming names, but a previous administration in the United States would have been perhaps skeptical of the importance of sustainability. Whereas yesterday, on Earth Day, Boris Johnson in the UK committed Britain to 78% less carbon footprint by 2035, which had people kind of almost like drawing breath at the scale of the ambition. So for the Travel Corporation and other companies, private enterprises that are committed to greater sustainability, how important is that advocacy at a governmental level?
Oh, it's critical. Because the disparate nature of travel and tourism is such that we simply cannot decarbonize our supply chain on our own. And to have commitments such as what Boris came out with, what Biden came out with, Canada's was not as ambitious. It's another conversation. It's important because, of course, so much of it approaches infrastructure. And that's what we rely on. Travel and tourism doesn't own its own infrastructure. By and large, we're rare in that we own a lot of our own assets. So it's very, very important. But it's also interesting because, what that should do to people in our industry is wake them up to the realities that there is going to be reporting requirements coming down the line for us. And that, the strategy that we have in place and the way we're measuring them, we're prepared to report on it when required, and in fact are going to be reporting of our own choice. So I think it's important. I also think it's should be a bit of an awakening for corporations that haven't yet taken this in-house.
When you have a team like your own and a company led by the Tolmans who have this commitment clearly, and it's clear from the literature, this deep and abiding commitment towards greater eco-responsibility and sustainability in the coming years. Is it frustrating then when you see brands that kind of greenwash, that they come out and make all the right noises, but then there's very little happening in the background?
It is frustrating, and I'm prepared for it because on the back end of COVID, and I know we will get to the back end, it has to happen soon. And on, the commitments that you will have seen, and the shift that you're happening in technology and in business, even in investment practices. Yes, it's frustrating because we're going to see much more of it. Now that it's become so important, so high profile, so sort of in your face in the marketplace and the media, I think you're going to see a whole heap of a lot of people saying we have a policy in place, but you must dig and you must say, well, are you committing to numerical reductions? Are you committing to smart targets, and are you going to report on your progress? And even then, you have to really consider what it is that they're doing. But yeah, that's just going to keep coming, I think.
Shannon, and I think the entire travel industry echoes that sentiment that we will see the back of this, hopefully sooner rather than later. So let's move forward a couple of months, maybe 3 months, and we are now looking into the end and into a future that is free of COVID. So what's the next year looking like for you and your team?
Implementation and no more launches. So we are driven by our action plan and our reporting plan, and that is what we do. I've got Nadine on my team and Parissa on my team. Nadine and I work on implementing. So we have an action plan per brand on what they need to do to ensure that we meet our group level goals. And so it's a little bit ticking the boxes to check in on implementation, checking in on research on new fuel sources, checking in on the horizon of fleet replacements to switch to EV or hybrid vehicles. All of these things are what we're doing to implement. And then Parissa, the wonderful storyteller, is trying to communicate with guests and travelers on what they can do on their own, how they can identify a more responsible provider, the small things they can do when they get back to traveling to sort of bring their sensibilities on the road.
Shannon Guihan, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you very much for taking the time. I know today's your day off, so you were very, very kind to step into your shed to talk to us. And I can see there's a bike behind you, which I have it on good authority. You are going to take a big long ride on it after this.
I am. I'm going for it, and I'm pretty excited.
All right. Well, listen, Shannon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.